Do you also, I'm sorry, go
So
ahead.
it's just the key of communication from the get-go. You know, however the call comes in, the dispatcher relaying that to the officers that are responding. Communication is key across any industry, Mike. You know this. Communication is key. So it's critical that our guys on the street know early on what they're dealing with, so they can mount an appropriate and a compassionate response here.
So with that being said, do you include dispatchers in the training you provide?
So, yeah, so some of the uniqueness in the New England region is that some police officers here in New England still will work the desk. So some agencies have full-time police officers on the desk. Other agencies will hire part-time or civilian dispatchers. So we do try and incorporate the dispatchers in our training, and I do let them know that they are pivotal in this equation, because they are the key point for receiving accurate information and communicating that accurate information. So the dispatchers are incredibly important in this equation.
Yeah, and that's what made me think of that. It's really, really important. If a dispatcher finds that information out over the phone, it's very important for them to communicate that to the responding officers as soon as possible.
Correct.
Man, that's a really
and
good
then what we tell the dispatchers is just do a generalized, hey, you know, sector 1, 2, 3, just to advise you, subject may be on the autism spectrum. You don't need the dispatchers don't need to get into in depth of what their diagnosis is. It's just a generalized description for the responding officer, so they know, okay, the behavior I'm about to see is more indicative of being on the spectrum than being on a narcotic. Yeah. And that's key. That's incredibly important before they arrive.
Yeah. Well, man, this is valuable information. I really appreciate you sharing this with us, because like I was telling you before, you know, me being here in Tennessee, this is training that we don't necessarily receive down here. And I think that it's really important for us to understand that, yeah, this is a key issue across the country. And I think that law enforcement needs to focus on training their officers on this. And I think what you're doing up there in the Northeast is really great, man. And I really commend you all for that.
Just understand this, Michael, that the autism rates in Massachusetts are no different than Tennessee. The ratio is the same across the country. Tennessee has just the biggest problem as Massachusetts or Connecticut or the Northeast or California. This is affecting all of us. And it's really important that we get our first responders trained to be able to recognize this and be able to respond correctly.
Well, man, I tell you what, we didn't really even get into the questions that I had planned for us. You know what? But that's great, because we actually covered some really, really valuable information in this interview. Some information that I think officers will be able to actually take to heart, and hopefully will kind of get their wheels turning and make them think about things, and maybe even slow down when dealing with people that they even if they haven't received your training and they're told that the person may fall within the autism spectrum, that maybe they'll just remember this and say, hey, okay, I need to take a step back and slow down a little bit and kind of dig deeper into a little bit of what we've got going on here, and maybe handle this a little differently than we normally would.
Absolutely. And that's really what our training is designed to do, is just get them to slow it down, you know, and try and rely on the training that we provide, or rely on the experience that they have. So you may have one of your officers on the department that they may not have a child on the spectrum, but they have a niece or a nephew. And what I do is encourage them to say, you have vital experience. It may not be your child, but someone within your family, your niece or your nephew, you've seen that behavior at family functions. You're critical to your agency because you have that experience that your coworkers may not have. You've seen how the particular family handles the meltdown, handles that particular issue. So you have, believe it or not, these officers have vital information that they can help, you know, encourage other officers that may not. They can help incorporate that. You know, I could tell you, Mike, I could go to every agency and there's going to be a handful of officers within every single department that if they don't have a child themselves, there's a high likelihood that at least 2 to 3 guys in every department has somebody in the family, whether it's a niece, a nephew, or a cousin, and they have experience that they can rely on to help them. because they've just encountered it at family functions.
Yeah, yeah. So with that being said, officers that are listening to this that, may fall within that description that you just gave us, where can they go to find out more information about what you all offer?
Well, they can either reach out directly to the South Norfolk ARC, that's located up in Westwood, Massachusetts. That's right outside of Boston. They can also, what they can do is reach out to their local chiefs of police authorities, their local post or training divisions, to say, hey, there's a post here in Tennessee. Reach out to Post and say, hey, Post, do you guys provide any type of autism training here in Tennessee? And if Tennessee Post or training standards don't, saying, hey, it might be beneficial for you guys to consider this, because this is something that as first responders we're dealing with more and more, and there are other organizations throughout the country that have a model in place. So it's a multifaceted approach by getting support from chiefs of police or international chiefs of police or across the country, chiefs of police in individual states. It's pushing your training coordinators in each individual states, or your post training coordinators, to really get them, to explore this type of training. And it just, from a risk management, it just makes a ton of sense, Mike, that everybody's to get this training, because, it's where the officer hasn't been trained and there was a better response. And as a result, there's an injury or worse, there's litigation. Yeah. The municipalities and cities are settling. The family member lost a loved one and it doesn't take it back. And it really breaks down to its root core. It's just a lack of training.
Yeah, it really is. So let me ask you one more question before
you can add, and if there are a couple questions here that you're going through, you can ask me, and I'll absolutely try and help you. But we're just so unique that I don't know if I could give you a generalized way of doing it. It's just, we're a specialty group. We have a specialty niche. And we're really, if you think about it, we're kind of experts in this field, but only in this field. So we can advise or we can consult when dealing with an autistic individual, but beyond that, it's kind of a specialty. Right. And that's what differentiates our instructors from most. But go ahead and answer your question.
What's the most critical skill you think a police instructor needs to master in order to thrive today? And you could even relate that to instructors.
Sure. Yeah, I can answer that. So I think, Mike, it's communication. I don't want to tell you that it's taken me 23 years to properly communicate, but it may well have. The key for communication, whether it's expressive and receiving it, right. We've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? Let's quiet down. Let's listen. We've got 2 ears for a reason. Let's absorb everything before we respond. And it's really important. So whether it's our group teaching this or it's your other instructors across the country doing this, communication is key. Can you communicate effectively to your host audience to where you can get the point across that needs to be absorbed, that needs to be learned? And if you've got great communication skills, they're going to retain the information, whatever your subject matter is, whatever you're teaching. But you've got to become an expert. You've got to know it inside and out, and you've got to be able to communicate it effectively.
Very good, man. Hey, Ryan, I really appreciate you coming on today, man, and giving us the time and sharing, information about ALEC with our listeners. I think that it's something that's very important for law enforcement in this country. But unfortunately, I don't know that it's very prevalent, that many officers know that you even offer this type of training, maybe in the Northeast because that's where you're, based out of. But I think it's important that we learn that, yes, this potentially is an issue across the country. And I thank you again for coming on, man, and sharing your knowledge.
Anytime, Mike. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for tuning in to episode 7 of the Police Instructors Podcast. In this episode, we were talking with Ryan Roettger of the Autism and Law Enforcement Coalition. Again, I appreciate you listening. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast so you get updates when we release new episodes. Again, thanks. I'll talk to you soon.
That's all for this episode of Police Instructors Podcast. Be sure to visit onlinepoliceinstructors.com to get access to all of our episodes. While you're there, sign up to get notified when new episodes are available and get access to our free video series where we show you what it takes to move your training to the internet. Learn to leverage the power and flexibility of the internet and move your training online in a way that facilitates learning retention here on the Police Instructor Podcast.